Alright, so we have done tutorial number 1, which was the base cover and pages and the inside front cover and the front of the first page. Today we're going to move on and do the back of the first page, the second and third pages, both front and back. So stay tuned. Hey and howdy everyone, welcome back to my channel, Jeannie with Paper Pixie Ink. Today we are moving on to tutorial number 2. So let's dive in and get started by cutting 2 pieces of cardstock to 4 5/8 by 8 1/4. We need 2 of these because we are going to have flaps that open from the middle. And then you are going to score those at the 1/2 inch mark along the long side so that we can use that little tab to attach to our base page. Alright, let's go ahead and choose a pattern paper that we will cut to put on our front flaps and a card from the cut aparts to use as a closure. Alright, so let's cut some cardstock to create our little pockets on the inside of our flaps. To do this, we're going to need to cut 2 pieces of cardstock to 5 inches by 3 3/4 inches, and then you are going to score at a 1/2 inch on the 2 shorter sides and a 1/2 inch on one of the long sides. And then we are going to cut the corners that are scored with our paper snips, and then we are going to use a punch to edge the unscored side of the pockets. This step is optional. There are lots of things that you can do to decorate the edge of pockets. I just had this punch and I really liked it, so this is what I used. So let's go ahead and choose a piece of pattern paper to go on the base of our page here below the flaps. And then let's go ahead and choose some paper for the inside of our flaps. We're going to cut these to 3 7/8 by 8 inches. We're going to cut 2 of those, and then we are going to cut them to 3 7/8 by 5 3/4. Which would be the space above the pocket, and then the piece that you have left, which is 3 7/8 by 2 1/4, should go perfectly on your pocket. So moving on to the front of the flaps, we are going to need 2 pieces of pattern paper cut to 3 7/8 by 8 inches. And then we are going to cut a piece of black cardstock to fit on the little cut apart that we're going to use as a closure. And we're going to cut that to 3 inches by 4 1/4 inches. Let's go ahead and add 2 magnets to the top right and the bottom right of our piece of black cardstock that we just cut. And then we're going to go ahead and round the corners. So we're going to go ahead and ink the edges of our paper, and then we are going to glue down the left side and glue down our little cut apart onto our black cardstock as well. So let's flip over our little card for our front closure, and we are going to use it as a guide to put our magnets on our right side. So we're just going to flip them over, stick a piece of double-sided adhesive underneath them. I'm going to eyeball this and stick those down, and then I'm going to attach my paper on my right side. Alright, so to attach our little card closure to the front, I'm just going to mark with a pencil where I need to put the glue, and then I will use the magnets on the right side so that I know it's properly in place and push it down. Alright, so to decorate my large back area, I'm going to create a large photo mat. So I'm going to cut a piece of black cardstock to 6 1/2 by 4 1/2, and then I'm going to cut a piece of the pale papaya cardstock to 4 1/4 by 6 1/4. And then to decorate the side of it, I am going to use a couple of my 2 by 2 cut aparts. So I'm just going to choose a couple, and then I will cut some black cardstock to back it, and I will need to cut those to 2 1/4 by 2 1/4, and of course we'll need 2. And then let's go ahead and glue all of that down to finish off the back of our first page. All right, so the front of our second page is very simplistic. We're going to find a piece of pattern paper that we like, and this is going to be the base for the whole page. And then we're going to do a photo mat with another one of these little kind of landscape journaling cards. So for the photo mat, we're going to cut a piece of black cardstock to 5.5 by 4 inches. And then we're going to cut a piece of the pale papaya cardstock for the photo mat to 5.25 by 3 3/4 inches. And then we're going to trim a piece of black cardstock for the journaling card to 7 inches by 2 3/4 inches. And then we'll glue all of it down, and we're going to add a couple or a few of the Prima flowers from the collection to just help accent the page. Alright, so moving on to the back of the second page. This one is also very simple and very much like the front of the second, except for this one is going to be set up vertically instead of horizontally. So we're going to cut a journaling card that is horizontal. It measures the same, so we're going to need a piece of black cardstock to back that, and then a photo mat. So we're going to cut a piece of pale papaya cardstock to 4.25 by 6.25, and a piece of black cardstock to 6.5 by 4.5, and then a piece of black cardstock to back the journaling card to 2 3/4 by 7. And then we're going to ink everything up and stamp our little camera, and then we are going to glue everything down. And then as the last step, we are going to choose one of the pieces of ephemera from our ephemera pack to kind of lay down at the bottom of our tube, just to help accent it a little bit. Alright, so moving on to the front of our third page, we're going to create the little flaps that will go in a clockwise kind of motion around the page. To do this, we are going to cut 4 pieces of cardstock to 4.25 by 4 3/4, and then we're going to score at the 4.25 mark on the short side. And then let's go ahead and get all of these glued down. So the first one goes in the top left, the second one goes on the top right side, the third one goes in the bottom right side, and the fourth one goes along the spine edge on the left side at the bottom. All right, so now I'm going to look through my cut aparts and find one that I would like to use to hold these pages in place. So I decided to use one of these little square cut aparts. They measure about 2 7/8 by 2 7/8. And I'm going to go ahead and cut a piece of cardstock for this that measures 3 1/8 by 3 1/8. And then I'm going to ink it up and glue it down. So now I'm going to go ahead and choose a pattern paper that will go on the top of my little flaps, and I'm just going to cut them into squares, so 4 inch by 4 inch. And I'm going to use the one in the top left to kind of mark where my little flip piece is going to go, and then I'm going to grab a pointy tool. In this case, I just grabbed my vinyl pick, and I just made a little mark so that I could see where I needed to punch my hole. And I'm just using a 1/8 inch punch on my Crocodile. And now that I have that marked, I'm going to punch it in my cardstock as well, or on my pattern paper as well. That's going to go in my top left corner. And then I'm going to ink up all of the edges of my papers. And this allows me to grab a brad and test how this is going to fit before I go ahead and add on a magnet. Alright, so I am ready to attach my magnets. So I'm going to grab 2 magnets. I'm going to take this off of the pattern paper, and then I'm going to cut a secondary piece of cardstock just so that I can make the little twist part a little bit more durable. And I'm going to add a magnet to the bottom back corner of that, and then I'm going to add the second magnet like I usually do so that I can get this magnet in the correct spot in the bottom right. And then I'm going to go ahead and add my little flip component back to my pattern paper and just test while holding it down just to make sure that it is in fact holding and in the right spot for the magnets. And then I'm going to go ahead and glue that secondary piece of cardstock to the back of my flip component, and then I'm going to glue everything down. Alright, so now let's go ahead and choose some pattern paper for the base part of the page, and then a piece that we will cut into 4 pieces, 4 inch by 4 inch pieces that we will glue down. So let's go ahead and cut that, and we will ink the edges of them all, and then we'll glue everything down. Alright, so moving on to the back of our third page, we are going to keep this one somewhat simple. We're going to cut a large flap for the page that will measure 8 1/4 by 8 3/4, and then we're going to score that at 8 1/4 on the short side so that we create a page flap that's the same size as the page. And then we're going to cut a belly band as well, and we are going to cut that to 2 inches by 9 1/4 inches, and we're going to score that at the 1/2 inch mark and the 8 3/4 inch mark on the short side. And then let's go ahead and glue down our flap. We're going to grab a couple of magnets and attach those on the inside of the flap and the main page, and then we're going to go ahead and glue our belly band to the front vertically, roughly centered. I eyeballed it. You can measure exactly if you prefer. Alright, so let's go ahead and pick out our pattern paper for the front of this page as well as the inside. Alright, so let's go ahead and ink up our pattern paper for the top page and glue it down, and then we are going to cut a piece of our pattern paper for our little belly band. We're going to cut that to 1 3/4 inches by 8 inches, and we're going to ink that up and lay it down, and then we're going to ink up and lay down the pages on the inside of our flap as well. Alright, so to make the accordion style photo mat that we have in our belly band, we are going to cut 2 pieces of cardstock, one to 9 inches by 6 1/4 inches, and we're going to score it at 4 1/4 inches and 8 1/4 inches. And then we're going to cut the second piece to 8 1/2 inches by 6 1/4 inches, and we're going to score that one at 4 1/4 inches. And then we are going to fold along the score lines, and the little 1/2 inch tab you will use to glue to your second piece. So let's go ahead and get that done. Alright, so to finish off our little accordion piece, we're going to select one of our 4x6 journaling cards to put on the cover of this. And then we're going to cut 7 pieces of our pale papaya cardstock that we have been using for our photo mats. And those are going to be cut to 4 1/8 by 6 1/8. And again, we're going to need 7 of those. So let's go ahead and get those cut, and we'll stamp them with the little camera image, and we'll go ahead and get all of this glued down to our little accordion piece. So for the front of our fourth page, we are going to create the little half flap that will be attached to the right side of the page. To do that, we're going to cut a piece of cardstock to 4 3/4 by 8 1/4, and we're going to score along the long edge at 4 1/4 inches. And then we are going to go ahead and pick out some pattern paper to go on our base page and then on either side of our flaps. And we will be cutting our pattern paper for our flap to 8 inches by 4 inches. Alright, so we're going to create a little pocket to go on the back of our flap, and to do this we're going to cut a piece of cardstock to 2 3/4 by 5 1/4, and then we're going to score at the 1/2 inch mark on each side of the short sides and the 1/2 inch mark on one of the long sides, and then we're going to take a edge punch and punch the edge that we didn't score, and then we're going to trim the corners and fold our score lines, and then we're going to take our piece of pattern paper that we cut to go on the inside, and we are going to cut 1 5/8 of an inch off the bottom of that to go on the pocket. And then we're going to ink it all up, lay it all down on our little flap, and then we're going to attach our flap to our main page. So I'm going to use 2 more of the tabs from the Tim Holtz Bigs die that we used earlier to create 2 little tabs that will just swing up to hold this flap closed. I'm just going to use a couple of brads and the tabs that I will cover with more of the die cut paper to go on top of it. And so I'm just going to attach my pattern paper to the tabs. I'm going to ink the edges, and then I am going to lay them out and mark where I need to punch. Then I'm going to punch them. I'm going to attach them with the brads. On the back of the pattern paper, I will put a piece of 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch, 3/4 inch double-sided adhesive over top of the back of the brads so that I can make sure that they are held very well in place. And then I'm going to go ahead and apply my pattern paper to my base page. So our last step is going to be to go ahead and apply our last piece of pattern paper to the top of our flap, and then that will be our tutorial for today. Next time we will be doing our last tutorial where we finish off the back of the 4th page, the inside back cover, and we will decorate our front and add in all of our finishing touches. And as always, if you're interested in seeing more, don't forget to click on that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, everyone.